You are listening to the Green Living Chats podcast, brought to you by EcoAmet Solutions in Ghana. I'm your host, David. Here, we discuss emerging environmental issues in and around the world. We use this platform to promote environmental related projects. So stick around with us. Here we go. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Green Living Chat podcast. And on today's episode, we are talking about recycling incentives and waste recycling businesses. In solving the common waste problem all over the world, we have to make these kind of businesses and solutions quite attractive for people to get into it. And one organization in the world that is doing this amazing job in developing countries is WasteAid. And to talk about this topic, Zoë Lenkiewicz, who is the Senior Technical Advisor and Head of Communications of WasteAid in the United Kingdom. We talked about how she got into these programs and how she ended up using her skills and experiences to author one of the significant tools used in waste management and recycling incentive programs. So why don't you grab a chair and a coffee and let's get into today's episode. Good morning, Zoe. Thank you so much for joining me on the Green Living Chat. It's really good to see you and to be able to have you on the podcast. Thank you, Zoe, for coming.
Thank you so much, David. It's a pleasure to be here.
Zoe, I was talking to you earlier before we started this podcast, and I just really want you to know that people all around the world, especially in the African region, really appreciate you. You know, let me tell you an interesting story. So I interviewed a guy about the latter part of last year, Nelson from Ghana. He's turning plastic waste into bricks. So, you know, after the podcast, we were just having a casual conversation, and I was like, oh, you know, recently I've been in touch with a lady and she's with WasteAid. And as soon as I mentioned WasteAid, she was like, is it Zoe? And I'm like, huh? What are you talking about? You already know her? And I'm like, wow. And it's not just, the story doesn't end there. There are lots of other people that you just connect with, talking about how they can improve their work and other things. And they just mention your name. You know, someone even just sent me your number. It was like, just confirm if it's that person. I'm like, wow. Zoe, it's really beautiful, the work you're doing. Before we start anything, I just want to say that people really appreciate you. And I think that everything you're doing is, you're really leaving a very beautiful mark in the world. And no one will ever forget that. So thank you for what you do, Zoe.
David, wow, thank you so much. I'm blushing. That's really, really nice to hear. Nelson, I remember very well. He was very welcoming to me when I visited his factory in Tema, in Accra. It was an honor to meet him. You know, he's a real leader in what he's doing. And that's one thing that I love about my job and how it's developed, is that I get to meet so many inspiring people around the world, especially in West Africa. I've met so many. And it's always, it's just a delight when you meet people that are from a completely different place, but with the same mission and, you know, really like-minded spirits. And yeah, it's just great. I think we all find it very energizing to connect and learn from each other.
So someone listening to this might be wondering, what exactly do you do? But I am more interested in how this whole journey started, Zoe. So how did you end up? I'm sure you did some few things before ending up with WasteAid. So where did this interest come from? Where did this passion come from? I really wonder, because I couldn't find that on Google.
Well, yeah, thanks for asking. So when I was 11 years old, it was the first United Nations Earth Summit that ever took place, and it was in Rio de Janeiro. And I was addicted to a children's television program called Blue Peter. And on Blue Peter, every week they would teach you how to make something from waste. So normally it would be with a washing up liquid bottle or the inside of a toilet roll tube. And we would make all sorts of things, you know, like a rocket or a house or whatever. And I just loved it. I just always loved creating things from waste. We didn't have a lot of money to buy expensive craft kits, so whatever I could, whatever my mother would let me use, and that's what I would use, and I loved it. So when the Earth Summit happened and this program Blue Peter made a big deal of it, that was it. I was just hooked. I understood how my creative passion could link with this bigger global mission of environmental protection, and I understood for the first time how important it was. So it all kind of came together for me at that point, really, back in 1992. Then when I went to do my degree, I studied environmental biology. I was really interested in ecotoxicology and pollution. Realized then that there were, really significant problems emerging in lower income countries where there was a lot less attention being paid to these problems as well. And so I did a master's in environment and development. Now, from there, I just started working in waste management. It was a point when the European Landfill Directive had just been introduced. So local authorities across the European Union had to start introducing separate recycling collections from people's households. So there was a lot of jobs in that area at the time. So I got my first job in local government, went from there to an academic group, from there to a consultancy working on major waste infrastructure. And then I was like, not that I was learning so much, but I wasn't applying what I had learned to this challenge of, waste management in developing countries. Like, that's what I really, really wanted to work on. So in 2015, when the opportunity came up to be part of the founding team of WasteAid, I just jumped on it, and I haven't looked back. I absolutely love it. Yeah, that's the story.
Wow. So actually, at a very young age, you already had this recycling incentives with you, and it's really amazing. Wow.
I was completely smitten. And now I think I just got the perfect job because it's all about making things from rubbish.
Exactly, right?
I haven't really developed in 30 years.
and how has this experience been for you being at WasteAid? Over the years, you've been working with so many people all over the world. How has this experience been?
Yeah, so I love it. I learn something new every single day, normally through interactions that I have with people that get in touch with us, either through the website or LinkedIn or Twitter. There's a really active community of people that are really passionate about this subject and keen to share ideas and learn from each other. And yeah, I just find it really energizing. So, yeah, I guess at WasteAid, so, I really enjoyed building something from nothing, and we really did it on a shoestring, which of course is my speciality. And yeah, I guess just kind of building our brand, who we are, getting that, reaching out and building those partnerships and relationships with other like-minded organizations, starting to influence policymakers and decision makers, connecting with corporates that want to help make a positive difference in the world, and bringing it all together. It's a really, really great opportunity, and I'm really, really honored to be able to be a part of it.
I just really love the idea of WasteAid. It's just so perfect. Just the name, it just encourages you to do something. But I just want to get your personal thought on this. Do you think that we are actually making a change? I mean, with all these ideas, lots of people are getting into these kind of jobs for different reasons. So sometimes I just sit down and just wonder if we are actually making a change, because does the level of pollution and the level of, let's say, environmental management, does it really match what we are doing right now? I'm just trying to say that, are we really making an impact with all these initiatives?
It's a really, really good question. I think what gets me out of bed every day is that we need to do more, right?
Exactly.
So no matter how much we're doing, we need to do more. And, population growth and urbanization and economic development, all of these things result in more and more waste being generated.
Yeah.
And so our work is ever more urgent. Every day it's more important that we get out there and make more and more impact, right? So it can seem like an overwhelming challenge.
Yeah.
And like nothing that we do will ever be enough. But I think
Exactly.
that that's even more incentive to get out there and do as much as we can, right?
Exactly.
Because if we don't even give it a shot, then we don't stand a chance.
That's it.
And I think that, I think public awareness is really increasing, especially around solid waste. Plastic pollution in the oceans really got people's attention a few years ago. And while that's not the only problem caused by poorly managed waste, it's served the subject well in terms of getting people's attention and helping them understand, oh, actually, where is it coming from? It's not coming from the ocean. It's not coming from the rivers, it's coming from the land and from the people. And so, that's where the interventions, in my mind, that's where the interventions and the investment really needs to go.
Mm-hmm. You just brought another question to mind, that working with different people are coming from different backgrounds with different cultures, different experience, and different mindsets. But we seem to have a very common, to face a very common problem. How do you make sure that we keep, the facts right? How do you make sure that we keep informing the people with the right information so that it doesn't get overwhelming? Because we have so many people, as I said earlier, that people are joining this whole campaign and this whole, initiative for different reasons. Some people just, try to go into zero waste just to feel good about it because they feel like, yeah, I'm doing something good, but not necessarily to make an impact. How do you make sure that, because I know you're into campaign and advocacy and all these incentives, how do you make sure that the right information is passed on?
I don't mind why people are engaged with it. I don't mind, whether they're just wanting to live a zero waste lifestyle because they find that desirable and attractive, or because they want to change the world. I don't mind where people are on the gradient, and I don't mind what their approach is. Some people want to work on I suppose, and the WasteAid approach because we're waste managers by profession. However, I also completely encourage people that are doing craft, upcycling type things, or people that are campaigning to reduce waste in the first place, because I think that the challenge is so big that we need to be approaching it from all the different angles. And whatever skills and passions people have, for the topic, they absolutely need to be welcomed, because it's a multifaceted challenge. And it's going to take all of our creativity, all of our ideas, all of our ingenuity to make a sizable dent on the challenge that we need to make. That said, I think I was reflecting on this question before we got on the phone today, and I think that although culturally we are very different around the world, some places communities like to work in cooperatives, whereas in other places it's more private business attitudes. All this kind of thing, many differences culturally. But actually, when you look at the waste that people are generating from their households, there's not much difference at all. Yeah. In poorer economies, food waste takes a larger proportion of the waste stream, not because more food is wasted, but because there's less of the other stuff.
Yeah.
Right. But overall, I can look at a waste composition analysis before we start working anywhere to see what is in the waste, what materials are there. There's never any surprises. It's always the same stuff, We live in a global economy. The packaging companies and the big brands are operating globally. It's the same materials for packaging and products that are getting into all of our homes wherever we live. And I think that's something that we can use to our advantage, because, LDPE plastic, the stuff that's used for plastic bags and wrap, wherever you are in the world, it behaves the same way. If you want to manage it and treat it, it's exactly the same process. And it's the same with food waste. It's the same with metals. Whatever waste you have, doesn't matter what culture you're in, science and the material is still the same. So that makes it a lot easier than it might seem, I think, which is a positive.
I really like the way you look at these things, and well, it shows that you're an expert in what you're doing. So in your own words, how would you describe, or how would you explain this to our listeners? What is waste recycling businesses, and what are the recycling incentives in general? What are these things? Or what are these kind of businesses?
Okay, so yeah, there's lots of different ways that you could set up a recycling business. Some materials have kind of global value chains. So a value chain is where, it starts with somebody collecting the material. They will sell it to maybe a middleman who will sell it to a reprocessor who will turn it into a new product, and that would then be sold back into the supply chain as a product, right? So that's what we mean by value chains. And there's all sorts of different roles that a business could take at the different steps of that value chain. So, if you want to get into recycling, you could be operating in the collection space. So you're providing a service to householders or to businesses or to government to collect the material, and you want to be collecting it in a way that's what we call clean. And I know the idea of clean waste is a bit sort of contradictory, maybe,
Exactly.
but yeah, but to train people to separate the different waste materials at the point at which they become a waste. So your food waste all goes into this box, your dry recyclables, so your paper, tins, plastic, whatever, give them a rinse and let them dry, put them into this box. And that way, we can really maximize the value of all of these materials. So that's going to help the local economy. It's going to boost jobs. It's going to provide resources for society. And it's also going to reduce the amount of raw material that we need to extract. That's from forests or from mines or from the ocean. If you wanted to be part of like the global economy, for example, of plastics, there's companies that collect PET plastic, which is your clear plastic bottles, like your Coca-Cola bottles, water bottles, this kind of thing. Chip it down and then export it to a country that wants to buy the material, where the washing and reprocessing takes place. It's quite an expensive material to recycle, PET, unfortunately, much more difficult than most of the other plastics. So there's only, certain factories around the world that can actually process it efficiently to make new bottles. So, you could be part of that value chain by collecting and chipping and exporting, or you could alternatively, like there's just so many great organizations out there doing wonderful things. There's some innovations lately coming from a group in Nigeria called Planet 3R. I'm a huge fan.
Mm-hmm.
They've been putting LDPE, so the plastic bags, cutting that into strips and putting it onto a weaving loom and making a beautiful fabric that doesn't look recycled, which is the magic about it. You're limiting your market if it looks recycled. If it looks like a brand new material, then you've got, the world is your oyster really with your customers. And that's a real good trick. And they've recently started weaving with PET as well. So I haven't seen it yet myself, but I'm really, really excited at what they're doing. And I think and this comes back to, should we be recycling or should we be upcycling? I think there's space for all of it. There's so much waste out there. We can all be doing whatever we want, and there will still be more than we can deal with. Just want to encourage anyone, whatever creativity or innovation or business you want to go into and develop with recycling, just go for it. There's, no time like the present.
Every time you just talk to anyone into these kind of business, they start with the challenges. Lots of them are going through challenges, and one of them is, the value that is placed on the things they are recycling. And it sometimes makes me think that how efficient are these kind of jobs, because people don't see the value in waste. And also the economy is not really supporting these kind of businesses. So, I mean, how do we pay our quota to, circular economy and trying to help in environmental sustainability? What are these challenges in these startups, and what are some of the initiatives we try to put in place to solve these little challenges?
Sure, thanks, David. I think it's a really important question. I think that in Europe, where we have very supportive government policies and incentives and targets and goals and fines and all this stuff, it's still a challenge to develop a successful recycling business. Okay. Waste is not gold, I'm afraid to say, and we need to be realistic about our expectations there. There is definitely income to be made from managing waste, but it's low margins. So I think I would say that you need to pick where you're going to be on that gradient. So you can either be dealing in bulk with low value material where you're going to make small margins, but because you're managing a lot of it, you've got enough to make a business. Or you work at the upcycling craft end where you're processing small amounts of material, but you're making a big markup. Right. So I think, and as I said before, there's space for all of the different options, but I think that anybody wanting to go into recycling needs to decide where they're going to be on that and be realistic about what your operational costs are and what your margins are going to be. People that are collecting waste from the streets or from dump sites or whatever, they're providing such a valuable service to society. And I think it's a travesty that at the moment they're normally only paid for the value of that material. Value of the material isn't sufficient, right? And this is a challenge that waste managers have to overcome all over the world. But I really think that waste collectors ought to be paid for their service to society, as well as the market value of the material, because actually the cost of that material as a waste, as an unmanaged waste, the pollution cost to society is much, much greater than actually the material value of the item. And so we need to kind of redress this in economics and how we look at this kind of thing. There was a recent very important economic report came out called the Dasgupta report that identified this as well, that our current economic models are not valuing environmental protection enough. It's difficult to make headway while we're undervaluing the one thing that we all need for our survival, which is a healthy planet, right? So when it comes to collecting and processing waste materials, it's really important that we try to, having those materials separate at the beginning is really important. For example, I've seen lots of projects that are trying to compost food waste, but if that food waste has flexible plastics, quite often there's a lot of plastic bags, plastic film, even polystyrene in it, then your end product is also going to have that stuff in it. And no farmer wants to be spreading that on their land, right? Plastics on agricultural land will prevent the roots of your crops being able to get down into the ground and get the nutrients and water that they need to grow. And so the last thing we want to be doing really is spreading plastic waste across our agricultural soils. We need to protect those soils for future harvests and so on. And it works the other way as well. If your plastic is really heavily contaminated with food waste, no plastics reprocessor is going to want to touch it.
That's it.
It's disgusting, right? It's it's just a big, ugly, stinking mess. So the magic with waste management is getting that stuff nice and separate and what I would call clean. Yeah. And then you're on the right track.
So getting this out of the way, I really want us to talk about WasteAid. WasteAid is doing so many amazing things, and guess what, guys? We have the senior technical advisor here to tell us what WasteAid does. So what is WasteAid and what do you guys mainly do?
WasteAid is UK-based international non-governmental organisation. We have charitable status, so we can fundraise.
I can imagine how many times you have said this.
No, it's cool, and it's always a pleasure. So yeah, we're a charity, so we can fundraise from the public. We work with corporate donors as well. And we work hard to get institutional funding, for example, from UK Aid or the EU, this kind of body. How we work, we partner with established community-based organizations in lower income countries or even middle income countries where there is a lack of waste management systems. If there's wherever waste is leaking into the environment, there's an opportunity for us to get in there and make a positive impact, right? So our approach is very livelihoods based. So one thing that I see is, the European or Western, if you like, model of waste management is based on the fact that in Europe, wages are expensive, but technology is relatively cheap. Whereas somewhere like West Africa, it's the other way around here. You've got really high unemployment and technology is relatively very expensive. So our approach kind of takes that context into account. We're not into high cost, high tech solutions. We're into people first solutions, providing employment, creating decent, dignified livelihood opportunities, making sure that those opportunities are inclusive of women, of people with disabilities, refugees and other vulnerable and marginalized groups. I think waste management by its nature is quite an inclusive sector, kind of because of the stigma around it, meaning that a lot of people just wouldn't want to touch it. But that means that there's more opportunities available for people that aren't worried about that kind of thing and just want to make a living, So I think there's a lot of opportunity there. So yeah, we design our projects to meet various, we would do a needs assessment in the place that we want to work in. We'll identify what the main problems are that are being caused by poorly managed waste. So quite often there's like serious open dumping. Well, when there's no waste collection and no formal waste disposal sites, of course, it's just, dumping maybe in the street, or, there will be small informal dump sites or even massive informal dump sites. These dumps attract vermin, they pose a hazard to wildlife and livestock that are often roaming around. Children as well, can get harmed while they're playing and that kind of thing. But then also, understandably, people then set it on fire to get rid of it, because otherwise you're going to be looking at it forever, right? And it's just going to keep accumulating. And, a lot of the time people don't appreciate, like, you can't just magic waste away. What are you going to, even in high-tech, waste management systems in Europe, you're still either burying it or burning it, okay, in a sanitary landfill or a highly regulated incinerator, but it's still, we can't shoot it into space. You've got to do something with it. So obviously, waste hierarchy, people, waste reduction is always the best thing to do. It's the most cost effective and sensible thing to do. Then if you can't do that, obviously reuse what you can, just reduce the amount of waste that you're generating. Then once you've got your waste that you can't somehow avoid, make sure you're separating it nicely, get those materials back into those value chains. It's jobs, it's economic opportunity, it's resource, it's, reducing pressure on our forests and oceans and so on. So we're strong on our monitoring and evaluation, making sure that we're really engaging with the people that we're working with, designing the solutions with them so that it's context specific. We know that it's going to work in this culture, in this village or town or city with these waste materials. How are we integrating the project into wider society? So, engaging with other stakeholders like the municipality, local businesses, the existing value chains that might be there for different waste materials, identifying groups that are already supporting vulnerable and marginalized people. So we will work in partnership with them to maximize the benefits of all this resource that we're kind of recovering from the waste stream. Yeah. And then generally doing our best to spread the word. And I'm such an evangelist for the power of waste management for sustainable development. I just think it's a no-brainer personally. So that's kind of our approach, sort of in a nutshell.
It's really just amazing how, all these environmental projects are sort of directly related to, social lives and the culture of people everywhere. But, you guys are dealing with a very sensitive aspect of business because, as we just started talking about earlier, all these business, of course, the end product is to be able to get money. And of course, along the way, be able to, protect the environment and contribute to sustainability and all that. How do you choose project A over project B? And what kind of criteria do you look at? I just want you to explain that because I think that everyone has a good idea, but how do you choose a project over the other? And what kind of criteria do you look at? Because I think this will help someone.
Thanks, David. No, it's a really, really good question. And I have to say, like, it's a privilege, but it's also a sad thing that we get approached by so many people
I
wanting
can
to work with
imagine.
us.
Yes.
And we're still quite a small team. So we have a lot of growth to do still until we're able to fulfill our real potential and work at the scale that I know, we have the potential and there is the need for us to do. So yeah, how do we prioritize who we choose to work with and where? I would say, first of all, we always look to work with established organizations. So although passionate individuals are brilliant, but for the sustainability of a project, it's much better if it's an organization that it doesn't need to already be working in waste management, but they need to be embedded in their community. They need to have like a few other projects going on so that they're not going to be completely reliant on this WasteAid partnership, because for the sustainability of their organization as well as ours, we still need to have some independence and then work as strong partners. Okay. Then we would also look at the needs in the area, which, to be fair, isn't that difficult because anywhere that lacks comprehensive waste management has a need, right? But there might be specific issues. For example, if it's a coastal community, like, we're working in Douala in Cameroon. So Douala is a coastal city. There's 4 big rivers come down through, West Africa, join at the Cameroon estuary. This estuary is an internationally important marine biodiversity site. 40% of the population in Cameroon makes some kind of living from that estuary. And yet I don't know if you've seen the pictures on our website or if you've been there even, but those rivers are full of plastic. And I know that this isn't an uncommon thing. Sadly, wherever we seem to go, we come back with similar photos. And I was giving a presentation once to a group in Indonesia and showing them these photos, and they said to me, "Oh, we thought it was just here." I'm like, "No, dude, it's everywhere." It's like, don't go thinking you're special. Good thing that because we're all dealing with the same problems, those waste materials that are causing the problems are all the same. So if we can find a solution that works in one place, we can share that with another place and
just replicate,
help amplify. Exactly, scale it up, replicate and amplify the positive impact. So yes, check out the partner, understand the needs of the area. Is there already a supportive enabling environment in the town or city? Does the government or the council have policies or bylaws that would support this kind of intervention? Are there other NGOs or businesses working in this space, and how well are they collaborating? What are the gaps? Where is the stuff slipping through the net, and how can we implement a livelihoods approach to recovering that material, keeping it out of the environment, creating jobs? That's kind of our modus operandi. Always with a lot of health and safety advice and trying to influence the decision makers as well, so that it's not just because, if you're just going from community scale project to community scale project, you're just scratching the surface. But what we really want is more fundamental change, right? And yes, that takes time and we need to be patient, but we just need to keep chipping away at it. With every project, using that to help increase our advocacy and build our message, build our network around the world of like-minded organizations that are all calling for the same thing.
And so far, it's been working like magic because we can see the results. It's just really amazing. So we know about the WasteAid toolkit, right? How does this work? Supposing I'm a young guy somewhere in West Africa and I want to start a business, what offer does this kit have for me?
Okay, thanks. So yeah, you go to wasteaid.org and click on the toolkit button and it will take you into a mini site. This was, we call it a toolkit. It's a fancy word for like a guidebook, maybe. I don't know. We were funded by the Chartered Institute of Waste Management in the UK a few years ago. So we published it in October 2017. And I was just looking yesterday, we've had nearly 250,000 visits to it. So we're very clear of the need for this kind of support around the world from like more than 250 countries. I don't know how many countries there are in the world, but we're pretty much there. So the toolkit is it's in 2 main sections. The first section is called Making Waste Work. And that is like the whole thing is designed for people who live in lower or middle income communities, countries that lack a comprehensive waste management system. And it's basically saying to you, like, you don't have to wait for your council or your government to come and provide this service. You can get together with community members and you can start making a positive impact today. Okay, so it talks you through how to understand waste, how to look at it through like my eyes, getting nice clean waste, how to talk to different stakeholders in your town about it, how to get support from the places that you need that support. Yeah, how to identify the different materials. So that's kind of the main, the sort of the book element of the toolkit. And then there's about a dozen illustrated step-by-step how-to guides for turning waste materials into something useful. So we have, food waste into compost, even food waste into compost using worms, which I have yet to try, but I really, really want to because worms are super cool. And then there's the instructions for making like the paving tiles from plastic bags and sand, or there's all sorts of different activities that you can do there. So yeah, it's freely available. We've got a few little YouTube videos showing some of the processes as well. And yeah, I would just encourage everybody to dip in and explore it. And hopefully there'll be something useful that you can take away from it that'll inspire you to make a start.
We would do well to link some of the projects that you have done over the years in keynotes, and anyone can just click on these and get some information about this. I just want you to tell us about the role of campaign and advocacy, because you talk about this so passionately, but people don't see what is wrong. People know, it's happening, it's because it's what's supposed to happen. People don't see the essence of, changing our ways, reducing our waste, getting into recycling incentive businesses. What is the role of environmental advocacy and in the campaign in, sustainable management?
Okay, well, I think we don't need everybody in the world to feel hugely passionately about it. I get that I'm a bit of an anomaly with that. But I think that it's right to say that everybody in the world would like their children to grow up in a healthy environment, right?
Sure.
Nobody wants their child to catch a disease or an illness just because we didn't manage to sort out our waste. I mean, honestly, sorting out our waste it's a basic thing. It's not complicated. Okay, it takes some thought and some effort and a bit of investment, but it's so worthwhile. Like back in 2015, there was a report by the International Solid Waste Association and UNEP, the United Nations Environment Programme. And they found that if you operate in a place that's got no waste management system at all, for every dollar that you invest in a waste management system, you get $5 to $10 of value back to society. So whether that's in terms of reduced healthcare costs, reduced flash floods because your drains are not blocked with plastic, improved economy because your livestock aren't dying early because their stomachs are full of plastic, or because you're creating jobs, which means that families can afford to send their kids to school and help develop the economy for future generations as well. I just you don't have to be a passionate deep green environmentalist to recognize the value of waste management. I think individual campaigning or like community campaigning, I do think it's really important. I think there's a really big place for it. For example, like recently when there was this TV documentary, Blue Planet 2 with David Attenborough. Lots of people in the UK saw this. Obviously, David Attenborough is like a national treasure. And so people feel really passionate, where he leads, everybody wants to follow because, he's done such a great job. And so following that, lots of people in Britain were very, very, and not just Britain, admittedly, but, very enthused suddenly and concerned about this plastic pollution in the oceans. And so it was in the media because, everybody cared about it. So the media were talking about it. And as a result of that, then government wanted to make sure that their policy was addressing what people really care about so that they could get good media, and then the companies themselves started making pledges to make sure that this plastic pollution wasn't going to continue at the same rate. Now, what we've seen is that those pledges have come into place in Britain, in Europe, but what we really need is for them to come into place in Africa, for example. But that will take people from, in their own African countries to actually get together and demand that change for themselves. It's not as effective for somebody from elsewhere saying, oh, this change needs to take place in Kenya or this change needs to take place in Ghana. No, when the Ghanaian people come together and say, we need change, it doesn't need to be really expensive or complicated. We just need, basic waste management services. For these reasons, we recognize the value of it to society, and actually it's got such a good return on investment that, there's no time like the present to make a start, because you'll never regret it.
If you have the chance to change something in how we behave towards the environment right now, what would it be?
Okay. Just use less. Consume less. All the stuff. I went through a stage of my life where I was a bit of a shopaholic. I spent more money than I had on stuff that I didn't really need. I mean, don't get me wrong, I had lovely shoes. They were beautiful shoes. But but in the grand scheme of things, you can't take this stuff with you. And in the end, a lot of the time I think people just buy stuff sometimes to make themselves feel better, as a bit of comfort, as a kind of like, oh, I've worked hard, I deserve to treat myself with something. Try treating yourself with something that's good for you and the planet, rather than just buying something for the sake of it. I think, a lot of the time our consumption is unnecessary. We buy stuff that we don't need and we don't really value. We don't really care about it. Mm-hmm. So it's just going to become a waste. So yeah, that I think that would be my one takeaway, is just to be a little bit more mindful with how much unnecessary stuff we buy.
For sure, anyone who listens to this podcast is just going to gather so much information about how WasteAid works and what we can also do, initiatives that we can bring in. And there are people there to help us to polish our ideas and make them interesting. When you just go to WasteAid, just say, I'm looking for Zoe. She's the person you have to look for. Trust me. And your ideas will be turned to amazing things. Thank you, Zoe, so much, so much for coming on the show today. I really had a nice time with you and I really appreciate you coming. I don't know if you have anything that I missed or you want to say.
Thanks so much, David. I mean, it's been an absolute pleasure and an honor, and I love any opportunity to evangelize about waste management. I would just say one last thing to
no
people
one
listening.
uses that word with waste, evangelize.
Sorry.
It's so amazing.
I'm like, okay, my final message then, if I may, is that I just want to share that waste management is a fascinating and really rewarding area to work in. It's got roles for all sorts of people, from IT systems to mechanical engineering, psychology to global politics and economics. I would encourage anyone who's interested to pursue a career in sustainable waste management. You'll learn so much along the way and be able to make a significant positive impact for future generations. Thank you.
And if you're just confused on how to start, just look for Zoe. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you, Hi. David. It's been a pleasure. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. There is a bonus episode coming up soon where Zoe shares stories from her 2 top projects in 2020. Why don't you check it out? Also available on all podcast platforms, including our website, www.ecoametsolutions.com. We are available on all social media platforms at EcoAmet Solutions. See you on the next episode. Until then, live green.